I never thought I'd be the kind of daughter who kept receipts. Literal receipts, gas bills, pharmacy visits, hospital copays. But when your parents start treating you like a stranger in your own family, it's hard not to keep track of every sacrifice. My name is Danielle Morris, and I was the quiet one, the dependable one, the one who never made a scene. That was always left to my older brother, Brian. Brian, who could crash a car, lie to a judge, and still get praised at Sunday dinner for learning responsibility. I once got a flat tire on the way to a job interview and heard nothing but, "You should have checked it sooner." Still, when our father had his stroke last winter, I was the first to step in. I cut my work hours down to part-time. I skipped vacations. And I sold my car, the only thing I'd ever fully paid off myself, to help cover the first wave of medical bills before the insurance kicked in. I didn't even think twice. I just did it. Mom cried on the phone that night. "You're our rock, Danny," she said. "We don't know what we'd do without you." Brian didn't show up to the hospital once during the first week, not until the doctors said Dad might not pull through. Then suddenly he was there, all crocodile tears and promises. "Whatever you need, I'm here," he said, handing me a cold coffee and telling nurses he was Dad's emergency contact. I didn't argue. I didn't want to make a scene. I never do. But the scene came anyway, 6 months later, in a lawyer's office that smelled like lemon cleaner and betrayal. Our parents had rewritten their will. Equal share, I'd assumed. I'd hoped. Instead, Brian got everything: the house, the retirement account, the lake cabin in Michigan that I'd personally helped restore after a storm tore through the roof 2 summers ago. To me, a sentence. A single sentence. To our daughter Danielle, we leave our love and gratitude. Love and gratitude don't pay rent. They don't reimburse sold cars. I didn't cry. Not there, at least. I shook the lawyer's hand, nodded politely to Brian, and left the office before anyone could see my lip trembling. 3 weeks later, Mom texted me out of the blue. "Need help again. Doctor's visit. No one to drive us." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, "Sorry, I'm just the chauffeur, remember?" And I hit send. After I sent that message, I waited for a reply. Nothing came. Not that day, not the next. Mom had read it. There were 2 little check marks next to the text. That cold modern way of confirming someone saw what you wrote and chose silence anyway. I told myself I was fine. I was busy enough. Working double shifts at the clinic, borrowing my coworker's car when I had to run errands, walking when I couldn't. I'd always been someone who made do, but something inside me was unmoored. Something that used to keep me grounded had come loose, like an anchor cut from the seabed. I tried not to obsess. But then came the photos. Brian posted them on social media, smiling next to Mom and Dad at a steakhouse, Dad holding a glass of red wine he probably shouldn't be drinking post-stroke, Brian's arm around him like he was the one who carried him through it. Mom looked healthy again. Her hair dyed, lipstick back. There was even a new car in the background of one photo, a navy blue SUV. It took me a moment to realize it was my old car. I knew that dent on the side mirror. I'd parked next to that imperfection for 6 years. That car had been mine since I was 25, until I sold it for half its worth to make sure Dad could have the ambulance transfer he needed. I felt sick. I sat on the floor of my 1-bedroom apartment, the air too still, my body too hot. Brian hadn't just taken the inheritance. He'd bought my car back, with money that should have never been his to begin with. I called Mom. I didn't plan to. My fingers moved before I made the decision in my head. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Danielle? You gave him my car." There was a long silence. Then, "He needed something reliable. With all the driving he does for us, it just made sense." I laughed. I actually laughed, short and sharp. "So now he's the chauffeur?" Mom sighed. Don't be petty, sweetheart. You know you never really needed it anymore. You always said you didn't mind walking. I said I didn't mind walking when it was for you, I said quietly, when I thought it mattered. You're being dramatic. It was like a pin to a balloon. I ended the call. That night, I sat on my balcony, wrapped in a blanket, thinking of every birthday I spent cooking dinner for the family, while Brian showed up late with a store-bought cake and got praised for remembering. Every holiday I stayed home while he jetted off to Aspen or Phoenix, or wherever his latest girlfriend dragged him. And somehow, it had all come to this. Me, forgotten. Him, rewarded. But I wasn't going to play quiet anymore. I decided to make a list, not of what I'd lost, but of what I had left. I didn't know why, but something told me I'd need it soon. The list started small. March, paid ambulance transfer fee. April, bought bedside commode. May, canceled weekend trip to help with insurance calls. June, sold car, walked to work for 2 months. But the more I wrote, the more I remembered. Not just the past year, but all the little moments no one else ever saw. Staying up until 3 in the morning in college to help mom balance the checkbook. Driving home from grad school every weekend to help fix up the lake house after the flood. Taking unpaid leave when dad had surgery on his shoulder. Paying Brian's utility bill once when he lost his wallet, even though I knew he hadn't. I filled 10 pages in a spiral notebook. It wasn't about revenge. At least that's what I told myself. It was about clarity. I needed to see it all in one place, to remind myself I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't making it up. But the world doesn't let you sit quietly with grief. It presses forward, loud and demanding. And 3 days later, I got a voicemail from my Aunt Margaret. "Hi, Danny, honey. Just calling to check on you. Your mom mentioned you were in one of your moods, and I wanted to hear from you directly." I hadn't spoken to Aunt Margaret in over a year. She was Mom's younger sister, the one who used to braid my hair and sneak me extra dessert when I was little. But in adulthood, she'd drifted more toward Brian, laughing at his bad jokes, co-signing his nonsense. Still, I called her back. I don't know why. Maybe part of me wanted to hear someone say I was right. She picked up on the second ring. "Danny! Oh, sweet girl, I've missed you. Did Mom really say I was in a mood?" A pause. "Well, she said you've been a bit cold lately, that you snapped at her about a text and hung up over something small." Small. I swallowed my anger. "She gave Brian my car, the one I sold to help with Dad's hospital bills." Another pause. Longer this time. "I didn't know that," she said quietly. "She didn't tell me that." She doesn't tell anyone anything that doesn't make her look like the victim. "Danielle?" "I'm not being dramatic," I cut in. "I'm being tired of pretending, of sacrificing, of being the only one who remembers." There was a long silence. Then she said softly, "Do you want me to come over?" I hesitated. "Why?" "To listen," she said. "Not to fix. Just to sit with you, if you'll let me." And something in me cracked. Not from anger, from the shock of being offered something without having to earn it. Later that evening, she came with pie and quiet eyes. We didn't say much, but she saw the notebook. She asked what it was. "My record," I said, "so I don't forget the truth." She nodded. "Don't stop writing." The next time I saw Brian in person was at the grocery store. It had been almost 2 months since the will reading, and I'd gone out late, hoping to avoid people. I was in sweatpants and a stretched hoodie, gripping a basket with eggs, bread, and a can of soup I didn't really want. I wasn't in the mood for anything heavy. Not in my stomach, not in my life. He spotted me near the frozen food aisle. "Danny!" he called out like we were high school friends bumping into each other, not estranged siblings with a shared wound no one wanted to admit was still bleeding. I didn't answer. He walked over anyway. "Man, it's been a while." Not long enough, I muttered, shifting the basket to my other hand. He chuckled like I was joking. Mom said you've been laying low. Everything good? I turned to him then, really looked. His hair was cut short, and he had that casual smugness that always came out when he thought he had the upper hand. Did she tell you I saw my car on your Instagram? He blinked. What? The Navy SUV. You didn't even take the bumper sticker off. Still says nurses make it better on the back. Oh. His eyes shifted. Yeah. I figured it'd be good for running errands for them, you know? With the money they gave you. He raised his hands. Look, Danny, I didn't ask for any of that. They made the choice. I wasn't going to fight them on it. You fought them on everything else for 30 years, I snapped. But this is where you draw the line? He narrowed his eyes. Are you really going to hold all this over my head? After everything I've done? Done? You mean showing up for dinner and calling it support? You mean letting me carry every burden until you saw something shiny? He scoffed. You need help, Danielle. You've always been a little intense. That word, intense, it landed like a slap. All my life, Brian had been reckless, selfish, volatile. But when I showed emotion, I was intense. I hope that car breaks down on you, I said flatly. I hope every mile reminds you it wasn't yours. And I walked away. I cried in the parking lot, not because I regretted it, but because it had taken me 35 years to finally speak without apologizing. That night, I added to my list again. I wrote, grocery store, ran into Brian. He still doesn't get it. Probably never will. But I do. The next day, Aunt Margaret came over again. She brought lemon tea and a folder. I was going through some old papers at the lake house, she said. Found something you might want to see. Inside the folder were handwritten notes. Letters. My dad's handwriting. Instructions from years ago about finances. Notes about me. About how much he relied on me. Called me the steady one. I stared at them in silence. They rewrote the will before his second stroke, she said softly. I think he might not have known what got changed. I sat with that folder on my lap for over an hour after Aunt Margaret left. The notes were unmistakably Dad's. Loopy handwriting, always with too much pressure on the pen. One page listed his account numbers. Another detailed his medication routine. But it was the third that undid me. It read, if something happens, Danielle knows where everything is. She's the only one who's never let us down. I traced the sentence with my fingertip until the ink blurred. I could still hear his voice saying it. That dry, practical tone. Dad wasn't warm. He never really hugged, never said, I love you, without someone prompting him. But this was how he loved, with preparation, with trust. So what had happened? The date on the letter was 6 months before his second stroke, 2 months before the revised will. I took the folder to work the next day. I didn't show it to anyone, but I kept it in my desk drawer. It made me feel stronger, like a piece of armor under my sweater, like I wasn't crazy. That afternoon, Aunt Margaret called again. Her voice was quiet. Your mother's been talking to a lawyer. I sat up. Why? She's worried about reputation, about you digging around. She thinks you're trying to cause trouble. I let out a breath. She rewrote the will, didn't she, after Dad's second stroke? I don't know for sure, Aunt Margaret said, but I do know she didn't show it to him. I asked once, and she brushed it off. And Brian? Oh, he's always around now, helping her with her taxes, driving her to appointments, playing the golden sun. Of course he was. I could picture it perfectly. Brian dropping in with donuts and fake charm, keeping her comfortable just enough to stay useful. She's scared of being alone, I said softly. She's scared of being questioned, Margaret replied. You've shaken something loose, Danny. I can feel it. I stared at the spiral notebook on my coffee table. "What do I do with this?" I asked. "Keep writing," she said. "And maybe, think about talking to someone, a lawyer maybe, just to understand what's possible." That night, I wrote for 3 hours. I wrote about every time I'd driven Dad to physical therapy, every phone call with the insurance company, every night I slept on a hospital cot, every weekend Brian didn't show up, every joke Mom made about me being single so I had the time. And then I wrote a title at the top of a new page: Contingency Plan. I didn't know what it meant yet, but the page stayed open beside my bed. I didn't call a lawyer right away. It felt big, final. Like once I said the words out loud, there'd be no walking them back. And some deep-rooted part of me still wanted Mom to call and say, "I'm sorry, we'll fix it." But she didn't. Instead, a week later, I got a voicemail. "Danielle, it's your mother. We're organizing a little memorial next month for your father's birthday. Brian's helping. He thought it would be healing. It would mean a lot if you'd come. Please don't make it about drama." I replayed it twice. Not "we'd love to see you." Not "Dad would have wanted you there." Just "don't make it about drama." I called Aunt Margaret. "Should I go?" She paused. "Do you want to?" "No," I admitted. "But part of me wants to be seen. I want someone in that room to look at me and remember I was there when it mattered." "Then go," she said. "But don't go for them. Go for you." So I did. The memorial was held at a rented lodge hall just outside town. It was warm and over-decorated, with blown-up photos of Dad fishing, Dad barbecuing, Dad holding Brian as a baby. None of the ones I'd taken of him at the hospital made the wall. Brian was everywhere, greeting people at the door like a politician, holding court near the buffet table. Mom stood beside him, nodding politely as guests whispered condolences and praise. I kept to the side, sipping weak coffee from a paper cup, unnoticed, until I saw Ruth. She used to be Dad's nurse during his outpatient rehab. I hadn't seen her in nearly a year, but the moment our eyes met, her expression softened. "I wasn't sure you'd be here," she said, hugging me. "Your father talked about you constantly. Always said you were his rock." I blinked back a sudden rush of tears. "Thank you." Then she added something that made my stomach twist. "He told me once, right after that second stroke, that he didn't understand why your mother had started moving things around, that it felt rushed, confusing. He said, 'I think I've lost track of what's mine.'" I froze. Ruth touched my arm gently. "I don't know if it means anything, but I thought you should know." It meant everything. I left early. On the way home, I called a law office. "Hi," I said. "My name is Danielle Morris. I have a question about contesting a will." The law office was tucked between a bakery and an insurance agency, in one of those older downtown buildings where the floor creaked under your feet and the receptionist knew your name before you said it. Her name was Beverly, mid-60s, glasses on a chain, a tone like she could smell lies before they left your mouth. I liked her instantly. "Have a seat, Ms. Morris. Mr. Lowry will be right with you." Mr. Lowry was younger than I expected. Maybe mid-40s, tidy hair, the kind of eyes that said he'd seen families fall apart and stopped being shocked by it long ago. He didn't ask me to justify my pain. He just listened. I laid out everything, slowly at first, then faster. The car I sold, the hospital nights, the will, the letter from Dad, the nurse's words, the folder Margaret gave me. I even brought my spiral notebook. He took notes in silence, then asked one question that shifted the ground under me. "Do you believe your father would have knowingly disinherited you?" "No," I said. "Absolutely not." "Then we may have something here, especially if the will was revised during a period of questionable cognitive capacity. Do you know the date of the second stroke?" I did. I had it written in pen, circled 3 times. And do you know the date of the new will? Yes. It's after the stroke. He nodded. We'll need medical records, of course. And we'll need to file a petition to pause any further disbursements, if the estate hasn't already been fully divided. It has, I said. Brian's living in the house now. Then we're talking about contesting the will outright. It'll be uncomfortable. It may involve depositions, possibly court. I took a breath. I'm not afraid of uncomfortable anymore. He nodded. Then let's begin. That night, I called Margaret and told her everything. She didn't hesitate. Whatever you need, I'll testify. I'll bring the letters. I'll speak the truth. I smiled through tears. Thank you. But the next morning, the first warning shot came. An envelope was slipped under my door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a folded piece of paper with 5 words. You're tearing this family apart. No signature. Just that sentence, typed. I didn't need to ask who sent it. I lit the corner with a match over the kitchen sink and dropped it in the basin, watching it curl into ash. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and careful silence. Mr. Lowry's office requested my father's medical records from the rehab center, flagged inconsistencies in his cognitive assessments, and began preparing a sworn statement for Margaret. I submitted my own affidavit, 3 pages, typed, where I detailed my role in Dad's care, the timing of the will changes, and the emotional toll of being quietly erased. I didn't tell anyone else, not my coworkers, not the neighbor who watered my plants when I worked late. I lived in a bubble of legal terms and personal memories, watching the world move on around me as if nothing had changed. But inside me, something had. I wasn't the same Danielle anymore. The quiet, agreeable one. The peacemaker. That woman was buried under years of silence. This new version of me didn't flinch when Brian's name appeared on my phone. She didn't jump when Mom's photo popped up in old albums. So when Brian showed up at my door without warning, I didn't hide. He wore a leather jacket and a frown. We need to talk. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. This is insane, Danny, he said. You're really dragging all of us through court over something you were never promised? I folded my arms. I wasn't promised. I was trusted. There's a difference. He shook his head. Dad's gone. This won't bring him back. You think he'd want this? I think he wouldn't want to be used as a shield for your greed, I snapped. Brian stepped closer. You want the house? Fine. Take it. You want the lake cabin? Sell it. I don't care. But stop trying to make Mom look like a monster. She did that without my help. His face flushed. You're going to lose. You know that, right? Courts don't care about feelings. I met his gaze. Then why are you so scared? He didn't answer. I turned and walked back inside, locking the door behind me. Later that night, I got a call from Mom. Her voice trembled. I don't understand why you're doing this. You do, I said. You just don't like that I finally am. Silence. Then she said, You used to be such a good daughter. No, I whispered. I used to be convenient. The court date was set for late November. I spent the weeks leading up to it in quiet preparation, gathering documents, meeting with Mr. Lowry, practicing my testimony in front of Aunt Margaret while she folded laundry at my kitchen table. Mom didn't call again. Neither did Brian. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that hums, like the air before a thunderstorm. Mr. Lowry warned me. They may try to paint you as unstable, angry, emotional. I am angry, I said. I'm just not wrong. On the morning of the hearing, I wore my navy blazer, the one I'd used for job interviews and funerals. I braided my hair back the way Dad always liked, and I packed my notebook in my bag like a shield. In the courtroom, Brian sat on one side with his lawyer, legs crossed, confident as ever. Mom sat behind him, stiff and unreadable, her lips a straight line. I didn't look at them. Margaret testified first. Her voice was steady, matter of fact. She spoke about the timeline, the stroke, the will, the confusion, the silence. Ruth went next. Her words were simple but powerful. He was disoriented. He didn't understand the changes. He told me so. Then it was my turn. I stood and read from my notebook. Just one page. Not everything. Just enough. I ended with the sentence Dad had written. She's the only one who's never let us down. When I sat down, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt calm. Let them say what they would. The judge took 2 days to return a ruling. I didn't pace. I didn't bite my nails or call Margaret a dozen times. I went to work. I watered my plants. I walked past the old parking spot where my car used to sit and felt nothing. Because something in me had already shifted. When the call came, I answered on the first ring. It was Mr. Lowry. The court found sufficient cause to declare the revised will invalid, he said. Your father's prior version will be reinstated. I sat down slowly, the words settling into my bones like warmth after a long freeze. It meant the house would be split. The cabin. The accounts. Brian would no longer have it all. And most importantly, the record would show that something unfair had been done. And undone. There may still be pushback, Mr. Lowry said, but legally, it's settled. Good, I said. Let them be angry. I've lived with worse. I didn't call Brian. I didn't return the text from my mother. You've embarrassed us all. I didn't need to explain anymore. A week later, I stood in the driveway of the lake cabin. Leaves had gathered along the porch, the wind off the water sharp and honest. I unlocked the door for the first time in years. Inside, it smelled like dust and old pine and memory. I brought nothing with me except my notebook. I sat at the table where Dad used to do crosswords and wrote one final line. I was never the chauffeur. I was the engine, and I've finally driven myself home.